Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you are new, my name is Carol and I'm glad that you stopped by. I hope you will consider subscribing, like and share my videos, and follow me on social media. I will leave all the links in the description box below. So today's video is by request. I've had a number of people contact me and ask me for a canning version of white chicken chili. So we're going to do that, and the method we're going to use is the can your own soup method from the National Center of Home Food Preservation. So we're going to do two things today. We're going to can up some white chicken chili for you to put on your shelf, and we're also going to learn the method that is approved for canning your own soup recipes. There is a safe way to take your own soup recipes and convert them to a recipe that is safe for canning. And I get that question a lot. Can I can my own soup recipes? And technically, yes, you can, but there are some guidelines that you need to follow to keep it safe. So the first thing you need to do when you are reviewing your recipes for canning them, you want to make sure that they do not include anything that is unsafe for canning. Those will be ingredients that you will have to nix right off the bat. So we're canning up white chicken chili, and in most white chicken chili recipes they include some kind of dairy, sour cream, cream cheese. Most recipes also include thickeners. So those things we have to eliminate right off the bat. So the recipe that I use calls for some sour cream and some cream cheese, so we can't add those to our recipe. That being said, I want to encourage those of you who want to can all the things. It's great to do that, but not everything benefits from canning. And there's nothing wrong with canning up something as a base of a soup or a dish that you like, and then adding some fresh ingredients when you open a jar. So we don't have to put everything in the jar, and you especially don't want to do that if it's an unsafe ingredient. So we're going to put most things in our white chicken chili, and then when we open a jar, I'm going to share with you how to add cheese and the dairy part to thicken it and make it what you would know as making white chicken chili fresh, if that makes sense. But you'll have the base of it on your shelf and ready to go, so it will eliminate time for you. So you're going to need to eliminate noodles or other pasta, rice, flour, cream, milk, or other thickening agents to any of your recipes. So you have to take caution with that. If dried beans or peas are used, they must be fully hydrated first. And the method for hydrating dried beans here is a little bit different than what is called for in the guidelines for canning up dried beans. For beans, which we are going to use here, I am using a 1 pound bag of Great Northern beans. You can use any white bean here. You can use cannellini beans, or you could use navy beans, whatever you prefer. I had Great Northern beans, so that's what I'm going to be using. So their method for making your own soup is to basically do a quick soak, which is what I did. So I sorted and rinsed them. I covered them with water. I brought them to a boil for 2 minutes, and then covered them and let them sit for an hour. So after they've soaked, you want to drain them. You're going to add fresh water to them to cover them, and then you're going to bring them just to a boil. So when we can up beans, the guidelines state that we should par cook them for 30 minutes. That is not part of the instructions given for canning up your own soup. So I've done exactly that. I've done the quick soak, I drained them, put fresh water on them, and then brought them just to a boil, and they're sitting off to the side ready to go. So the procedure for canning your own soup is select, wash, and prepare your vegetables, meat, and seafood as described for the specific foods in their own canning instructions. For every ingredient you're going to use, you need to be able to go to the National Center of Home Food Preservation and find guidelines for canning that specific thing. So we'll just start with the ingredients, and I'll go down the list and explain to you how I prepared all of them. The first ingredient we have is chicken. And in the instructions for canning your own soup, they want you to cover your meat with water, cook until tender, cool meat, and remove from the bones if you've prepared it that way. So I have 3 large chicken breasts that I just poached, and then I just shredded them and set them aside. So those are ready to go. The beans, I explained to you what we did with the beans. The other ingredient in our soup is going to be corn. Now corn, the guideline for canning corn on its own is to blanch it first. I'm removing that step and using frozen corn instead. It's totally fine to use frozen vegetables because they are blanched first, so it kind of removes that step for you. If you want to use fresh corn here, you're welcome to do so. You just would need to cut it off the cob and blanch it first. And then our recipe also calls for some onion. I just chopped a large fresh onion. We're going to be using some lime juice. I squeezed a couple of fresh limes. That's a totally safe ingredient to add to canning, to anything that you can. In a lot of recipes, acids such as lime juice are used for safety purposes. It's not used for safety here, it's just for flavoring. So I've got 2 tablespoons of lime juice, I'm sorry. And then I'm going to be using 2 cans of chopped green chilies. You could use fresh if you prefer. You would just need to follow the guidelines for canning up fresh peppers or chilies. So those are our ingredients. I'm going to be adding a slew of delicious spices to our soup. And then the other thing that we need for white chicken chili is stock. I'm going to be using, because we have corn in here, I'm going to be using some of my roasted corn stock, which I absolutely love. If you don't have that on your shelf, you need to get it on your shelf this summer when corn is in season. It's absolutely divine and heavenly for using to make soups. So I'm using a combination of chicken stock and the roasted corn stock. Now, with your liquid, which you can also use tomatoes, as part of the guideline for canning up your own soup, is when we jar it up, we have to have half solids in our jar and then half liquid. So you want to make sure your recipe may not call for enough liquid as you would make the recipe fresh. So I've estimated the amount of solids I'm using to be about 3 quarts. So I'm going to be using 3 quarts of stock in my soup. Approximately, hopefully that will be enough. Usually it works out to be enough, but you may need a little bit more, so you might want to have a little bit more on standby. So after you've prepped each individual ingredient, all you have to do is put everything in a stock pot and bring it up to a boil and boil it for 5 minutes, and then you're ready for canning. So that is the point we are at now. I have everything prepped, ready to go. So I'm going to bring you in close. We're going to put it together. We're going to boil it for 5 minutes, and then we're going to follow it up with our canning. So super simple stuff here. Let's get started. Okay guys, here we go. I have my 3 quarts of stock. I'm using 1 quart of the roasted corn stock, 2 quarts of chicken stock. To that, I'm going to add 1 pound of beans. I'm going to add 3 large chicken breasts that I shredded up. You can chop it however you want it in your soup is fine. I'm adding 2 cups of corn, 1 large white onion, 2 cans of green chilies, and we're going to add a whole slew of spices. I have 2 teaspoons of seasoned salt. I have a half a teaspoon of pepper, 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika, 2 teaspoons of cumin, 1 teaspoon of chili powder. I've used chipotle chili powder, but you can use whatever you want. 1 tablespoon of Mexican oregano, not Mediterranean or regular oregano. I'm using Mexican oregano. It's fantastic in any type of Mexican dish or a chili. I've also used 2 teaspoons of garlic powder. I'm going to put that in. I'm going to crank my heat up. We're going to bring all of this up to a boil. We are going to boil it for 5 minutes, and then we're ready for jarring it up. So while this comes up to a boil, I'm going to get my canner, my jars ready. Okay guys, we are all set for canning. I did fail to mention I did add my 2 tablespoons of lime juice at the end. So brought everything together, brought it up to a boil for 5 minutes and boiled it gently for 5 minutes. So we are all ready for canning. I'm going to be canning mine in quart jars, but you can also can this in pints if you prefer. You just want to make sure that you are starting with hot jars. I have washed my jars and I'm keeping them hot in a sink full of hot water. Modern canning guidelines state that you don't need to pre-sterilize jars or lids as long as you are canning for 10 minutes or more. We are going to be processing for more than 10 minutes, so I just washed my lids and set them aside. So we are all set to go. So I'm going to start with 2 hot jars. Okay, so to do this correctly, we need to fill our jar half full with solids, and then it needs to be topped off the rest of the way with liquid. So half and half. Okay, so ladle in half solids, and then we're gonna go back and fill it the rest of the way with our liquid. Okay, once you have correctly filled your jars, you're going to take a debubbling tool, plastic butter knife, or a chopstick and release your air bubbles. So just poke around your jar. Then we're going to take a paper towel dipped in white vinegar to clean our rims. Center our lid. And then add your bands to fingertip tight. And in the canner they go. Okay guys, I did end up with about 7 quarts. I'm only gonna can 6 of them. The rest of it I'm gonna cook off and we'll eat it tonight for dinner. Anyway, you're gonna get it roughly 7. I did end up needing a little more stock, about another pint or so of stock, so you may want to have some extra stock on hand. So right now I have, well, I had my canner ready before I put my jars in there. I had the rack in there, and I had 3 inches of simmering water in there, which is what you want for pressure canning. So now we're going to take what's left of our vinegar and pour that into our canning water. That just helps to keep your jars nice and clean during the canning process. Sometimes minerals in our water want to collect on the outside of the jars, and that prevents that from happening. We're going to crank up our heat. We're going to add our lid. I have the All-American canner. You line up with the arrow with the notch, and then you tighten your thumb screws 2 at a time, opposites. Okay, so now we want to bring our canner up to temperature so it will vent. That just means we want a steady stream of steam coming out of our vent here for 10 minutes, and then we can add our weight. A word about venting, I get this question a lot. I almost run out of water in my canner before my processing time is up. That could be due to several things. One, not properly filling your canner before you start the canning process. So you make sure you have roughly 3 inches of simmering water in the bottom of your canner. Also, venting for too long can allow too much steam to escape, which will deplete your water in your canner. So you just, as soon as you see some steam coming out of your vent pipe, you want to make sure to start timing. You need to do that for 10 minutes. Okay guys, we have been venting for 10 minutes, so now we're ready to put on our weight. I'm going to be processing for at 10 pounds of pressure. If you have a dial gauge canner, you're going to be processing at 11 psi. So I'm going to go ahead and put my weight on. Make sure you know your altitude. There are adjustments you need to make according to your altitude to process properly. So we're going to bring this up to pressure. Once I get to 10 pounds of pressure, my weight should start rocking, and at that time we can start our processing time. Now the kicker for this soup, the processing time is not what you think it should be. For quarts, we're only going to have to process for 75 minutes. For pints, you only have to process for 60. And you heard me correctly, it's 60 minutes for pints and 75 minutes for quarts. You would think that it's 75 and 90, but it's not. So bring it up to temperature. When it starts rocking, I'll bring you back. Okay guys, my weight has started rocking, so we're ready to set our timer. I'm going to process, like I said, for 75 minutes. If you're processing in pints, you're going to process for 60 minutes. At this point, you want to adjust your heat just to maintain either the 11 psi for dial gauge, or for the All-American canner, you want your weight to rock about 1 to 3 times a minute. So slowly adjust your heat. You don't want quick temperature fluctuations in your canner. That can cause siphoning issues. So slowly adjust your heat just to maintain. Process for 75 minutes, and I'll bring you back. Okay guys, we are all done. I processed for 75 minutes like I told you, and then when my processing time was up, I turned my heat off of my canner, let it reduce to 0 pressure naturally, and then removed my weight, waited about 5 minutes, and then opened my lid, and then waited about 10 minutes more before I've taken them out. But there you go. Doesn't that look delicious? Got our half solids, half liquid, really important to this method of canning your own soup. And again, the processing time for this is different because it's half solids, half liquids. It's the 60 minutes for pints and 75 for quarts. So that saves you some time as well. I did want to mention that I used this method in another video I did on beef vegetable soup or vegetable beef soup. I did use the same method, so you might want to check that out as well. I'll link it in an iCard and in the description box for you, so you can check out that soup as well. But it was using the same method here. So this is a fantastic way to safely can your own soup recipes. Just make sure you are very aware of what is safe for canning and what is not, and then you can tweak your recipes so that you can at least can up the base of it and then add the other things later. I also wanted to mention, to make this creamy white chicken chili, when you open a jar of it, you're going to add, and I'll leave this in the description box, but you're going to add 2 ounces of cream cheese and about 1/4 to 1/2 cup of shredded, any Mexican cheese will work, but I typically use Monterey Jack. Heat that together and then it will make it a nice creamy base for you. So that's a good way to do it. Also, this would make a great base for, or filling for, enchiladas or tacos, things like that. I would just drain all of the broth off and reserve that for something else, and then go ahead and add your chicken and your cheese, and then you have a delicious filling for enchiladas, tacos, and all that kind of good stuff as well. So I will leave all that information in the description box. As always, if you have any comments or questions, leave them for me in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and I will see you all next time. Have a fantastic day.